Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Monday, May 12th, and I am your host for this Agronomic Monday, Lyndsey Smith. It was a beautiful weekend, albeit a little chilly here in Eastern Ontario. But oh my goodness, my colleague Kelvin Hepner down in southern Manitoba, it hit 37 degrees Celsius, everybody. It's not often that southern Manitoba this time of year beats out Ontario, but here we are. And so the battle continues between Leafs fan Kelvin Hepner and me, someone with sense. Anyway, he was upset on Friday's show, if you listen to the issues panel, that we didn't talk about the Leafs very much. So here you go, Kelvin. This is your nod for the Leafs. Anyway, NHL playoffs still on, everybody. Go check it out. They're a lot of fun. Okay, on today's show, though, we are going to focus more on agronomy than on hockey. A few things I did want to point out, though. Definitely tip of the hat to those out on the prairies dealing with those hot temps and very dry conditions. So hearing from my colleague in Alberta, Amber Bell, you're going to hear from her in the second segment. She's dealing with very dry conditions around where she is, but got some much needed rain. Hearing from our farmers out of Saskatchewan, really could use a rain. So if everybody could be thinking very rainy thoughts for our friends out west, that would be great. On today's show, though, we are going to talk about seeding canola, which we're also going to talk about on the Agronomist tonight. So check that out, 8 p.m. Eastern. But we're going to talk with Dana Riley and learn about seedling survival and seed survival, two different things, both very important. We're also going to hear Product Spotlight with Rob Bahry of ADAMA Canada. And then Peter Wheat Pete Johnson is going to join me for the last two segments. We're going to talk a bit about some very mysterious disease issues happening in wheat. So stick around for that. And of course, when we have very cold weather in early May and corn is in the ground or even emerged, is it a bad thing? We'll explore that in the last two segments. As always, if you've got feedback, zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now, Scott Bishop, the National Sales Manager for Exotic Technologies. What is Invita? How does it fit into farmers' operations?
Invita is a naturally occurring bacteria. What this bacteria is able to do is capture that N3 from the air and convert it to a usable form for the plant as the plant calls for nitrogen. So once you get Invita into that plant, it's going to replicate. It's going to spread from the roots up through the plant to the newest growing point. We're one of the very few bacteria that actually gets inside the plant cell. Beyond the yield increase, you're going to see increased root mass. The original fear was it's going to affect nodulation. It does not affect nodulation, but it almost increases it because of the expanded roots under that plant. With corn, you're going to see additional brace roots. All crops, you're going to see a healthier plant because there's no stoppage of that plant growing. That plant, as it demands nitrogen, is going to be able to capture it from the air and convert it into a usable form.
So for those who are interested, where can they go for more information?
To our website, exotic.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and for farmers, trust is everything. Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress towards providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. Here today with Dana Riley, who is a tech service specialist with BASF. We're going to be doing a Canola School, talking about establishing seed survival, which is really important because we want our canola coming out of the ground as fast and strong as possible. So welcome, Dana. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so we're talking about seed survival. Let's just dive right into it here. What are some of the early season factors that are going to affect seed treatment efficacy?
Yeah, so canola is one of those plants that when you get it established, it will grow like a weed, and it is a strong weed in the Western Canadian landscape. But getting it out of that seedling stage can be really difficult. So there's a few things. One of the biggest things when we look at seed treatment and what it bolsters would be those early season diseases like seedborne blackleg, alternaria, seedling disease complex, which we have a short memory. We've kind of forgotten about some of those things, being that it's been so dry. Obviously, nobody's forgotten about blackleg, but seedling disease complex is kind of a thing of the past lately. But yeah, all of those early season diseases are protected by your base seed treatment. So it's really important that we are seeding the canola in a state that it's going to come out of the ground as fast as possible. And the reason for that is because we want the seed treatment to last in the crop. And if your seed is sitting in dry soil or too wet of soil or cold soil, really, it's going to delay emergence, and then you're not going to get as good of a bang for your buck on seed treatment as you would if it's popping out of the ground in 5 days. So that's kind of something to consider, is that delayed emergence is probably your worst enemy when it comes to seed treatment staying in the plant for long.
Right. So let's talk about that dry or wet soil, because soil moisture is a really big thing. How important is that to be monitoring that when you're going to plant?
When it comes to too wet of soil, if it's a saturated soil, it's going to restrict oxygen movement, which is going to kind of mess up your root development. So this is something, you can't control, but maybe you choose just to skim the canola in. If it's really, really wet, give it the best chances possible. There's other factors that might happen when it's really wet, like you seed in wet conditions and then you get a soil crust, or you get a heavy rain with a soil crust. That can be really hard on canola. It's just the nature of canola is quite small seedlings, so they can't break through the crust like something like wheat could. In conditions when you don't have enough moisture in your seed bed, you're really looking at an uneven germination, but this is something to not totally panic about. Eventually, fingers crossed, eventually it will rain. And you want to make sure that your seed depth is on point. So between that 0.75 inches to 1.25 inches, you don't want to go chasing moisture past that 1.25 inches, because it can really impact your plants per square foot or your target seed rate. So in those dry conditions, I know it's hard not to panic, but just keep it at the adequate depth. Eventually it's going to rain. It's going to fill in. Just something to keep in mind. Another thing with dry conditions, sandblasting when in the wind can be really damaging to a canola seedling. There's not a lot we can do about it, unfortunately, but it's just something to keep in mind when you have those questions of like, what happened this year? What happened to my canola? That can be a factor.
And let's kind of change direction a little bit and talk about fertilizer toxicity. What impact does that have on seed survival?
Yes. So, I'd say that fertilizer toxicity probably occurs in more dry soils. It can happen in wet soil conditions, but if you have lots of rain in the forecast, I wouldn't worry as much about it. The government of Saskatchewan has some really great charts. Now, this information was done in the 90s for all of the seed toxicity information. So you take it with a grain of salt, pun intended. And you really just need to know what's best for your operation. So are you using a mid-row? Are you having a side band? Did you spread your fertilizer beforehand? If we go off the provincial guidelines, we don't want to go more than 10 pounds of nitrogen actual seed placed. But I would challenge everybody to do a little bit of reading because Bourgault up in northern Saskatchewan, I think it's Curtis DeGoyer's the agronomist, and they've done some really interesting studies on seed toxicity where they're pushing limits. They're losing a lot of seeds per square foot, but they're not losing yield. So if you like doing trials on your own farm, play around with it, do your seed counts, and compare it to your plants per square foot that you targeted and see what your fertilizer mortality rate could possibly be. I know that's a bit of an off-kilter answer, but it's good to sometimes push the envelope.
If you're doing something like that, what impact does that have on weeds coming up then?
You know what? I don't think that it's going to push weeds up more than the average fertilizer. I think that's a great segue into critical weed-free period. Anytime we have weeds at the same stage as our crop, where you have something competing for a source, whether that source is of moisture, nutrients, real estate, whatever it might be. So if you're fertilizing really heavy and you have a bunch of weeds that you didn't take care of at your pre-burn, you're probably going to bolster the weed population rather than your crop population. If you've taken care of those weeds before seeding, you'll give that crop time to establish and outcompete some of the weeds there until you can get in for in crop, of course. So, yeah.
Which is super important. And we can't really talk about weeds without also talking about pests. Let's talk about bugs. I learned last year that aphids are like Russian dolls.
Yes.
And have 3 generations within each one. So that's, talk to me about pests and what impact do insects and bugs have on seed survival.
So pests for canola, kind of endless. Flea beetles, I think everybody battles with flea beetles, cutworms. Gophers are a really hot topic in the last few years. We've been in a dry cycle and people are having to deal with gophers. Those would kind of be the 3 beginning pests. Canola has a bunch of other pests later in the year, but I think with that critical weed-free period, you got to be thinking about, did I use an appropriate seed treatment for my area? So if you're on a short canola rotation, you're in a wooded tree area, or you have, a bunch of grass ditches pasture, you're probably going to be battling with flea beetles. So you need to check your fields, check. That's the best thing you can do. Look for damage, look for stem feeding, all that good stuff. And then when it comes time where we're seeing that 20-25% defoliation or feeding on the stem from flea beetles, it's time to go in with an insecticide to prevent any economic damage. In my experience, I've never regretted throwing my in-crop in at this point. I've never regretted spraying early. I have always regretted spraying late though. So, if you're at 1 leaf canola and you're spraying for flea beetles, you might as well throw in your glufosinate to take care of any of the weeds there, and then you're done. When it comes to cutworms, again, you just got to keep checking. You got to have somebody out on a quad looking for bare spots and digging around. And once you start to see bare spots the size of a pickup truck, you should have alarm bells ringing. If they're the size of a combine, it's probably time to load up the sprayer. And then for gophers, best way to get rid of gophers is really early in the spring. So if you have gophers and you're not out there dealing with them now, you got to get on them before they start having babies. So I know the Sask RMs have a program in place to put up like hawk towers, nests, and maybe help with some of the cost associated. So reach out to your local RM. But this is a critical time for canola. 1 to 4 leaf is when we baby it. And after that, you just kind of
let it do its thing.
Yeah, push it out of the nest, and it will become a beautiful crop.
Great. And then before I let you go here, let's talk about seeding depth really quickly and how important that is.
Yes, I touched on it a little bit, but I will remind everyone 0.75 inches to 1.25 inches is going to give you the best start for emergence. Anything deeper than that, cotyledon just has a really hard time pushing out of the soil, and it can damage yield at the end of the day because you're losing plants per square foot. If you're going shallower than that, really the only appropriate time is if you're somewhere in like the Red River Valley of Manitoba and you're just like swamped with water all the time. Some guys will just skim it in. But when it comes to water absorption, think of it, you've dropped your cell phone in the kitchen sink and you need to put it in a bowl of rice. Seeds are the same. You just need to put it in enough moisture that it's going to absorb a little bit of water. So if it's stuck in that moisture just a bit, you're golden.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with today's product spotlight right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit Corteva.ca to learn more.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit CanolaSchool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lyndsey Smith, and joining me for today's product spotlight, it's Rob Bahry. He's the development manager at ADAMA Canada. Rob, how are you?
Good, thanks, Lyndsey. Good seeing you again. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to see you. It is, of course, an exciting time of year, a new growing season ahead of us. One of the things, of course, that we need to be planning for is that disease management. And sometimes we need to be planning really early, depending on what we're focused on. Today, we're going to talk about Maxentis from ADAMA Canada. It's now in its second year on the market, and you've expanded the label twice already. Walk me through that. What label are we talking about? What's been expanded on it?
Sure, Lyndsey, thanks. So just the process of label expansion, that's adding new crops, pests, or use patterns to a pesticide label. It could be as simple as changing the wording or the recommendation from suppression to control. So it's somewhat of an ongoing process. While we have abundant data showing the value and exceptional performance of a product like Maxentis, applicators must follow label directions. Therefore, it's imperative that we have the most robust label possible to allow growers to take full advantage of the broad attributes provided by a great fungicide like Maxentis. So bringing a pesticide to market, it's a multifaceted process. It takes many years of development and research and providing data to the authorities at the PMRA to assess and vet and ensure that we're putting out the best possible product. So we try to bring a product to market as quickly as we can so that farmers can enjoy the benefits as soon as possible. However, this sometimes means bringing a product to market before all of the crops or all of the pests that are controlled have been fully vetted and reviewed by the authorities. So sometimes the initial label is a little bit thinner or limited to a few crops and pests. So the first year, sometimes the introduction is limited to only a few crops and pests, and we have the opportunity over time to generate more data, including from additional geographies under different environmental conditions. Then we can provide the PMRA with more information and more data that they can use, which often results in adding more crops or pests to the label, even if it's after the year of introduction or sometimes several years down the road.
And so when people tell you, always read the label, there's a good reason. Now, we should mention Maxentis. It's a fungicide. Perhaps listeners will recognize for treatment of blackleg in canola, but we now have ascochyta blight in lentils on label. For those who maybe aren't familiar, what are the early signs of ascochyta that growers should be looking for or their agronomist should be looking for? And why is it so important to be ready to potentially use a fungicide like Maxentis?
Right. Thanks, Lyndsey. So the first signs of ascochyta blight are small lesions that appear on the leaves and stems of lentils. These lesions can quickly grow in size and severity and can decimate large patches of lentils in a very short period of time. Because most fungicides, including Maxentis, primarily work by preventing disease from expanding, it is critical that Maxentis is applied at the first sign of disease. If conditions are such that reinfection is occurring over time, you can apply a repeat application maybe 10 or 14 days after the initial application.
So that is always one of those key points that we talk about with fungicides, is that they're not curative products, they're preventative products. And so early is really important, and you've got to be scouting for those symptoms. Now, what about blackleg in canola? We mentioned that, of course, that was already on label. What do growers need to be aware of when blackleg might be the target of a fungicide application?
Yeah, so blackleg is a little bit of a different animal. Most foliar diseases like ascochyta and lentils, the first sign of disease, you apply a fungicide like Maxentis for prevention. Blackleg, you also want to be preventative. The challenge with blackleg is application must be made very early in the season before symptoms are present. So you're essentially applying based on your knowledge of the field, your knowledge of the cultivar. Is it a susceptible cultivar? Is it canola stubble, or is it a tight rotation? What is the field history? And of course, the environmental conditions that you're expecting that season. Warm, moist conditions are conducive to blackleg developing. So you have to make an informed decision prior to the onset of disease with blackleg. So you really have to apply at the cotyledon or early true leaf stage for best control. So it's imperative that growers make that spray decision before the disease can be seen.
Mm-hmm. That is so early. And as you said, you've got to be ready for it if you're going to actually get ahead on this disease.
One more point to add with respect to Maxentis for blackleg, we do now have a lower rate registered. Growers can apply a rate range of 625 mils per hectare all the way up to just over 1 liter per hectare, 1.04 liters per hectare. So if you know you've had heavy pressure in the past and you want to, really use the high rate like we had in our original label, spray at that 1 liter per hectare rate. But now you do have the option of applying a lower rate if you're a little bit more unsure about how bad the blackleg is expected to be. And that new rate that we just got on the label about 1 week ago, 625 mils per hectare.
For those who, of course, may have follow-up questions, want to know more about Maxentis or ADAMA Canada products, where can they go?
Go to our website at adama.com. Of course, there's a Western link there and the Eastern link as well. And of course, you can feel free to contact any of our TSAs or ABMs, or obviously your local retailer can certainly help you with support and advice as well. Reach out to us by phone, text, email. We're more than happy to do what we can to support growers in the heat of the season here.
Wonderful. All right, Rob, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks a lot, Lyndsey. Take care.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Agronomic Monday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca. All right, we are back here on RealAg Radio. And joining me now, it's Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Pete, how was your weekend?
My weekend was awesome, thanks, Lyndsey. We got the corn planted on the weekend. The ground conditions could have been a tad better, but we do a lot of plots, and I had help, and it was 90% fit. And what's the rule, Lyndsey?
Mm-hmm. If it's fit, give her SHIT.
Exactly. And so we didn't wait for the 10% that was, it was close, but I'm one of these guys who really likes perfection. And I sent that text home to Sheila, my lovely wife, and she sent back I think you say that every year, that you just wish it was a little more fit. Get it done. So we got out there and we got it done. So Pete's a few acres of corn are in, and man, we planted a lot of plots. That's all I got to say.
A little sick of flags, are you? I'm also done at now. We are only May 12th, so there is time, but at the same time, there's not infinite time. So you got to look at the forecast. You got to look at the workload you got in front of you. But sometimes perfection gets in the way of completion. So just 90%, Pete, sounds pretty good to me. Now, for many, and I will say around here, so I'm west of Ottawa, drove around this past weekend, just sort of get a sense of what's going on. I don't know that I've ever counted that many planters rolling at once. So it was a very busy weekend. The soil here is fit, lots of units rolling, but we also, Pete, had very chilly temps. We did not drop down to a frost according to what I monitored, at least right here, but we did get down to like 3, 2. Should growers be worried? Because I know we did get maybe some freezing temps in other parts of the province.
Yeah, we wanted the parkas on those corn and soybean seeds, Lyndsey. Nature Nut Nick sent me his screen temperature. So it was 0 at Strathroy. It got down to -4 at grass. So Nick's great for having temperatures both at the screen level, which is 4 feet, and also at grass level. So -4, that's pretty darn chilly. And yeah, we definitely did have ground frost on at least 2, if not 3 mornings this past week. And we actually, Lyndsey, if you can imagine, the last frost in Hay Swamp, we had soybeans that were 50% emerged. We also had corn that had spiked through, and we had frost. And at the end of the day, you kind of say, ooh, that could be nasty. But remember that soybeans at that stage will take -2 for 2 hours. And so we did not see damage on those soybeans. They're fine. We did see a few of those corn spikes that actually got frozen. And interestingly enough, corn will only stand like -0.5 before you see that leaf tissue damage, but the growing point's in the ground. The corn will be fine. The soybeans, the growing point was at ground level, basically, if they're cracking through, but it looks like we dodged that bullet. Close bullet, but we dodged that bullet, and I'm not worried at all. That people have been calling and texting and emailing saying, is all these cold nights, are the corn plants going to turn around as they sometimes do and start growing towards the center of the earth instead of growing towards the sunshine? And if that happens, you can get these curlicues in corn. They get really screwed up and they're just this really tight, twisted curlicue. That almost never happens, Lyndsey. I am not worried about that at all. The corn has been emerging fine. Thank you very much. And so April corn basically is in that spike to two-leaf stage. And on the 12th of May to have two-leaf corn, that's pretty impressive in the province of Ontario.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's the other thing, right, is that now where we are anyway, not a hint of rain during this time either. So pretty dry conditions for that lower temp. It's not like, the seeds were imbibing chilly water. So that's a difference too, right?
Yeah, 100%. And so, and there's we talk a lot about cold water imbibition, and it's absolutely real, but it typically happens when you have an excess of cold water that the seed can just drink in. So if you plant a seed into fit soil that is cold, well, the water has to migrate to the seed as it imbibes. It needs to go through the soil through capillary action. And that movement happens, but it's not rapid. Where we really see imbibitional chilling injury is where I get chased out of the field with the planter by a 2-inch or 3-inch super cold rain. And so then all of a sudden I have this water that's at 3 or 4 Celsius that floods around that seed. It doesn't have to move by capillary action. The seed is hungry for the moisture and it sucks it all in, and it sucks so much cold water in so fast that it actually damages the enzymes in the seed. That almost never happens, Lyndsey, when we bring that water in more slowly, when we plant into cold soil that is fit soil and we don't get that big rain. You maybe can show it if you have the tray of soil in the fridge and it's always at 4 Celsius and that's all the water the plant can ever imbibe. But that doesn't happen in real life, because you get the cold night, you get the warm day, and you get some warmer water going into that plant as well. So it's real, but sometimes we overplay that card.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So everybody, chill out, take a breath. And the week looks beautiful for those of us here in Ontario. We're talking warm nights, very warm days, actually bordering on hot for a pygmy Viking like myself. I'll be honest. I'm not going to be at the beach this week, so 25 seems too warm. But I look at that forecast and think, okay, for corn and beans anyway, va-va-voom. We've got some questions about disease on wheat, so we can talk about that, but the week looks great, Pete.
Yeah, the wheat, from a getting the crop in the ground, there is a chance of rain, which of course would slow things down pretty significantly. With the high temperatures, with these warm temperatures finally coming, and the weekend wasn't that warm, but the sunshine was absolutely intense and the relative humidity was low. We were at 20% relative humidity. It felt almost like we were in Western Canada from a relative humidity standpoint. So our heavy clay soils started to dry out, and it's a phenomenally interesting thing to me, thought process. Why is it that a heavy clay soil in southwestern Ontario never seems to dry out until we get those hotter days and those lower relative humidities? And again, Lyndsey, I think it comes down to capillary action and the fact that water movement is slow in the soil. So you need a really big moisture gradient to get the water to actually evaporate from that heavy clay soil. If you're in a silt loam soil, man, you can do anything. You get onto a heavy clay soil, the Niagara Peninsula, into Lambton County, Essex County. You just have to have warm temperatures and low humidities to get that soil to dry out. Baby, it is drying out, and it looks like Like those areas are going to be able to get rolling as well. And that would be awesome if they could get some work done before the middle of May.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, the very warm temps. Now, if it gets too hot, that might be okay. But we do have some discussions that we need to have about the wheat crop, about diseases, potentially, maybe even a virus. So what is the latest on, let's start with rust, because I know we talked a couple weeks ago about stripe rust potentially being an issue. That blows in. But did we have rust that overwintered?
So, Lyndsey, you just go like, wow, last year we had such a rust outbreak, right? It was just stripe rust came up early. We had a winter that wasn't a winter. We were finding stripe rust in wheat varieties that we thought were fairly tolerant. We were having to spray because stripe rust is so yield impactful that if we were 3 or 4 days away from our T3 fungicide, we actually had to opt to spray to stop the stripe rust, because in that 4-day window, it can go from oh gosh, it's there, to oh gosh, we don't have a crop. That's how fast it can progress. And we thought this year, because the stripe rust, the leaf rust, it overwintered far further south. Pretty much all of North America had a real winter. The growers here in Ontario can attest that we had snow like we haven't seen it forever. We talked about snow mold. So rust is not an issue. Get over it. Guess what? We have samples sent away, so we are not, it's funny because we have overwintering rust in Ontario. They also found overwintering rust in Minnesota. They've confirmed that was stripe rust. Here in Ontario, we have overwintering rust that is Leanne Freitag found what looks like stripe rust overwintering in the Mitchell area. And Deb Campbell found what looks to be leaf rust, but we're not sure because we haven't got the samples back yet to verify, but that was in the Meaford area. So we have Perth County, we have Grey County, and individual locations where it looks like rust has overwintered. So it's totally a different scenario than we had last year. And what it means, Lyndsey, is that you got to get out there and scout, because if it overwintered in your field, then you need to spray to control that disease. But last year, because we had such a heavy spore load in the air, the risk was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. And so if you had a susceptible variety, you basically had to get out there and almost close your eyes and just go spray once we found it, because we knew the pressure was that high. When it's overwintering, now the spore load in general is quite low. So if it didn't overwinter in your field, you can wait for your T3 application and almost for sure you're okay. But if you have it that it overwintered in your field in particular, you can't wait, because it's in there, it's sporulating, and it's going to spread rapidly, particularly if it's stripe rust. Pardon me, because with these temperatures, stripe rust just flies through its life cycle, and its latency period, the period between when it infects and then when it sporulates again, can be very, very short under high temperatures, maybe as little as 4 or 5 days. So it cycles so fast that you just have to get out there and control. But in this case, it really comes down to scouting, to, a real integrated pest management, if you will, program. If you find it, you need to spray. If your neighbor has it, you need to pay even tighter attention, because it will sporulate in your neighbor's wheat and it can move into your wheat. But in general terms, the risk for most of Ontario and most of Minnesota, where they found it overwintering as well, and overwintering, Lyndsey, I should say, is really, really rare. I think once in my very long career, I have seen rust overwinter in Ontario. So this is to have it in several fields at Mitchell and at least one field at Meaford. That's pretty unusual.
Okay. That to me seems like we need to look into this further. So, that's your job, Pete. Well, let's take a break, and we'll come back with more of Agronomic Monday here on RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. Understanding the challenges you face, Nutrient Ag Solutions works with you to find the right solution every time. Nutrient Ag Solutions is one partner, all in. Visit nutrientagsolutions.ca to learn how their offerings work together to support your operation. All right, I am Lyndsey Smith, your host for Agronomic Monday, and joining me here again, it's Pete Johnson. Pete, we did talk about stripe rust just heading into the break, but there are some other nasty things out there we need to talk about. Do we know what we're dealing with? Maybe we'll start there.
So we're not 100% what we're dealing with in this particular situation, Lyndsey. Just like with the rust, we sent samples away to know if it's stripe rust or if it's leaf rust and to confirm what the race is, or what the races are that we're dealing with here, because that makes a difference in terms of the resistance genes that we're using for rust in our wheat varieties. But now we move into the barley crop and the wheat crop, and we are seeing what looks to be barley yellow dwarf virus. And what's really odd, Lyndsey, is that we're seeing it in early planted fields. That's not odd, but we're seeing it in just specific locations much more severely than we might generally expect. And we have these symptoms in wheat. Chad Anderson down in South Lambton has a wheat field that was planted early that has a lot of what looks like barley yellow dwarf virus, but a lot of the other wheat fields around don't seem to have it. And then we go to the Stratford area, and in winter barley in the Stratford area, we have it's either barley yellow dwarf virus or it's wheat streak mosaic virus. And we really need to know which, because barley yellow dwarf virus is spread by aphids. Wheat streak mosaic virus is spread by wheat curl mites. And in Ontario, we typically have not had an issue with wheat curl mites. And if this is wheat streak mosaic, that changes our management strategy tremendously, because if you're listening in Washington State, you're talking like those growers, Lyndsey, are saying like, you don't have it. Like, what are you talking about? One of the main focuses is no green bridge. Everything has to be dead for 2 weeks so that the wheat curl mites can't move from volunteer wheat to the planted wheat and give us wheat streak mosaic. And we haven't worried about the green bridge much in Ontario because we haven't really had that issue. But what's pushing us to think that it might be that is that barley yellow dwarf virus, you should use cruiser treated or an insecticide treated seed, because the insecticide, when that aphid that spreads the barley yellow dwarf virus, when it takes its little proboscis, it's like a mosquito on the plant, and it sticks that proboscis into the plant, and it sucks out some of the juices, some of the good stuff, and then as it's done feeding, it injects a little bit of material into that plant, And that's how the plant gets the virus when it injects it into the plant. Well, if it's cruiser treated or insecticide treated, that aphid dies. When it feeds, it has to feed, so that plant will be infected, but then it dies and it doesn't spread. We have fields of barley, winter barley, that have almost 100% of the plants showing viral symptoms, and they were treated with an insecticide, so that just shouldn't happen. And that's why we wonder if this is actually wheat streak mosaic and it's the curl mite that is not impacted by the insecticide treatment on the barley seed. And we got to sort this out. And if that's the issue, man, we have to start rethinking cover crop oats. We have to, there's a whole different set of things that we're going to have to start talking about.
Why is it, Pete, that when we change something else changes? And it creates a problem because it's biology. That's actually the answer.
Yeah, it's just nature. And
it's nature.
Yeah. And I did do a reel on the fields. Yep. If growers want to see it, they can look that up. Lyndsey, I'm not an Instagram person. You'll have to talk about that.
Right. That's right. So Pete, and thank you for doing this. So anyone who follows us on social media will have seen certainly lots of our videos, etc. But Pete is very good at, while he's in the field, giving us a snapshot of what he's seeing. So if you head to our Instagram, Real Agriculture, you can also follow us, of course, on YouTube, etc. You'll see some of that and would have got a heads up on this because it was up a couple days ago. So go check that out and follow us. We're delicious. There you go. Okay. We also need to talk about spraying this wheat crop. We've got some flag leaves out. What do we need to know?
Yeah. And so there is, Lyndsey, so get away from the weird stuff that's happening, the rust that is weird, and the barley yellow dwarf or wheat streak mosaic, whatever that virus is that's impacting particular areas or specific fields, and you get back to the kind of every day, this is what happens in the wheat crop. Have a nice day. So we have mildew showing up in the wheat crop at very high levels in specific fields or in particular with really highly susceptible varieties. And I had a grower say, well, can you share with us? Can you tell us which varieties are highly susceptible? Man, that is what Go Crops is all about. So Go Crops is the new website that houses all that information. So go to the cereal sections of Go Crops. You can find if your variety is highly susceptible. And there's a huge range, right? We have from looks like to be totally resistant to mildew all the way to what I would call pretty highly susceptible. And that's, we don't always see that level of difference between, like in Septoria, we don't see that. In mildew, we do. And mildew is the problem right now. But growers should be scouting. And if they have mildew, they should be controlling it. But there's lots of fields that don't have mildew. Meanwhile, I'm getting questions now because we have flag leaf out. And I'm getting questions from growers about spraying for herbicides. Right. If the flag leaf is out, Lyndsey, the damage is done. It's revenge spraying. And the problem is if the flag leaf is out, you can actually, the hormone herbicides can impact pollination. We are close enough to pollination that sometimes, doesn't always happen, you can get away with it. But the risk is that you affect pollination. If you affect pollination, then all of a sudden you reduce yield. I'm going to take a significant risk by spraying a herbicide on my flag leaf wheat. And my reward is zero because the damage is already done. And even if I'm going to have trouble harvesting the crop, which the wheat crop in general looks awesome, the chances of a harvest problem and needing a harvest aid in winter wheat in Ontario this year is really slim. But gosh, I can burn it down at harvest and still combine it fine. Like, get over this concept of spraying wheat once the flag leaf is out with a herbicide. A fungicide's different. Fungicide isn't going to reduce the yield. So if you have mildew and you missed it and you need to get out there and get that job done, do it. But leave the herbicide out because it's just it's high risk, zero reward. I don't play that game.
All right. That is a hard no, everybody. Hard no. What about 28% going on?
Yeah, so 28%, if the flag leaf has unfurled, if it's still poking straight up and rolled, if you will, then you can spray to still apply your last application of 28, and if you won't burn the flag leaf. And remember, the flag leaf provides a tremendous amount of the yield potential for that crop. So if we burn the flag leaf, the data is clear. We reduce yield. Have a nice day. Get over it. Just don't do that. I don't like burning the penultimate leaf, but if you get caught and you are short nitrogen, you have to get it on somehow, then get it done. But if the flag leaf is unfurled, find a different way to apply that nitrogen. Use dry. Don't use 28%, because I'm not in the game, Lyndsey, for some unknown reason. Wheat Pete is not in the game of reducing wheat yields.
It's strange, everybody, but it's true. Okay, so good advice, and I'll have everyone know that wheat brings with it, well, cereals. Penultimate, one of my favorite words, but peduncle. We'll talk about peduncles in a little while. One of my favorite words. Anyway, it'll be a couple weeks, then we'll talk about peduncles. Just quickly, we've got a couple minutes left here. I want to give you a scenario that we're sort of tackling here, and I'll do this as a let's just see. If I'm given the choice, we're talking soybeans, of putting them in with a drill now that maybe isn't going to do the greatest job, but it's going to do okay. It's May 12th. Or waiting to have it custom done by a planter, but it might be 12 days from now, maybe even 14. Pete, should I go and do it myself with my drill and do maybe an imperfect job, or should I wait for the planter to do a better job? And assuming the soil is fit right now, how do I make that call?
Lyndsey, what is rule number 1?
If it's fit, give her shit.
Exactly. Okay. And by the way, my great friend Al McCollum, just an amazing agronomist in Elgin County, one of the best. Al, he has this saying, and I just love it. It's, when it comes to soybeans, it's rows for show, drill for dough.
Oh, look out.
And so number 1, if the soil is fit and you can drill those beans in, then they're planted. And if the custom planter or a better planter, because if you can use a planter on 15-inch rows, then that's the ultimate for sure. If you're Eastern Ontario and white mold's a big issue, maybe 30-inch beans work for you. But for most of us, we want 15-inch row or even 7.5-inch row beans because they just yield more. But at the end of the day, you said maybe 12 days out. Well, you know what can happen in 12 days, Lyndsey? It's this little thing called rain. And 12 days becomes 20 days, and 20 days becomes 30 days, and suddenly it's June, and we've given up all this yield potential. He drills all his beans because he listens to the Al McCollum mantra. It's rows for show, drill for dough, get the dang beans in the ground.
All right. I like it. Okay. We got to leave it there. There's always so much more to talk about, but everybody check out Wheat Pete's Word. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on our YouTube, on realagriculture.com or at wheatpete.com. Every Wednesday, Pete, you bring us the goods. It's getting a little long, but that's okay because I listen to it sped up. So I am learning so much at half the time, Pete.
So I will endeavor to do it shorter, Lyndsey. I always say that. It never happens.
It never happens. And frankly, your adoring fans don't want it to happen. So absolutely not. Okay. Pete, thank you so much. And that, of course, Wednesday, Wheat Pete's Word comes out. Listen for that as well. And have a wonderful week, Pete. It's going to be beautiful.
Thanks. You as well, Lyndsey.
All right. That does it for today's show here on RealAg Radio, on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Give me a call, 1-855-776-6147. If you've got a question for Pete, you can leave me a message and we'll get you answers. All right. I'll be back. Actually, I'm lying. I'm off as of Wednesday because we're lambing. All right. Have a great week. Cheers, everybody.